Hey everyone, this is Mike Raber here for the Real Report for Tackle Shack. It is October 6th. It is fall. You can see me today. I mean, I'm wearing shorts. It's nice. It's sunny. It's 72 degrees, but you know, the weather has been awful for the most part. And you know, that cold weather we've had, that cold rain, that cold wind has really kicked the fall into gear. I mean, water temperatures in the area, I've seen as low as 54 on the St. Joe River. You know, I think most places are probably still in the higher 50s to, you know, right at 60. But at any rate, we're really slipping into fall. And fall, in my opinion, is probably the toughest time of year to really pattern fish. I wouldn't say it's the toughest time of year to catch big numbers because you can still do that, but it is a hard time of year to fish. There's a lot of things changing. You know, in the spawn, you know, when the spawn is coming, that's a transition too, but you know those fish are going to the bank. In the fall, they're just going wherever the food is. And you know, the fishing over the years, I've learned there's one great equalizer for fall fishing in this area, and it starts, you know, weeks ago, but especially like right now and for the next month, and that is this hunk of metal right here. So everybody who's watching this probably for the most part knows what this is. This is technically an umbrella rig, aka the Alabama rig, aka the A rig, aka the chandelier. But you know, you can call it whatever you want. People love it, people hate it. I'd say more than most, you know, most of the people in this area do not like it. I think that's because there's a lot of misconceptions about it, but I love it. I shamelessly love it. I use it whenever I can. I love catching fish on this thing. It is the most fun bite there is in bass fishing, period, when it's good. And so today I'm just gonna break it down for you guys a little bit. I'm gonna specifically probably target smallmouth more with what I'm saying, just because that's what I do in the fall as much as I can. But you know, we'll get some largemouth talk. So when it comes to throwing an A-rig, and this is for either largemouth or smallmouth, there are only 2 rigs on the market that I throw anymore. So I've played around with different ones. I mean, I've thrown the Strike King one and I like it. But there's 2 that I only throw now, and I'll explain why. One of them is the vanilla version of the A-rig around here, and it's the one that probably, if any of you own one, you know, if you actually only own one and you've never caught a bass on it, that's probably the one you own, and that is the Umbrella Flash Mob Junior. It is dirt cheap. It's like 12 bucks for the rig. It comes with pretty solid components. It's a smaller package, so it's not, you know, the massive giant umbrella rigs that existed, you know, 5 years ago. And it's pretty easy to use. I mean, this is the one that day in and day out, if I could only have one, I mean, I guess this is probably it, because I can use it in multiple situations. It's small enough to be compact and easy to use, but it's big enough that, you know, you can still create that illusion of a large school of bait fish. This one you can see, I've got rigged up with 1/4 ounce heads on the bottom, a 3/16 in the middle. Those are Bite Me Tackle shaky ball heads, and I'll show those a little bit more in depth later. That's the only heads I use on the rig. And then I've got my dummies set up with a hitchhiker on top. So this one is a little bit more of a heavy duty rig than the one I'll show you here in a little bit. This I would throw more if I was fishing like Detroit River, Benton Harbor, you know, those places where those smallmouth are going to be deeper. You know, you're targeting deeper water using heavier weights, anything like that. You guys will have to excuse the traffic noise. It is what it is. It's what we have to work through. Here is the one that I have been playing with more and more lately, especially on smaller bodies of water. Like, you know, I'll just name drop a few, like Klinger, like Six Span, St. Joe River, you know, and that is the Shane's Baits Mini Blades of Glory. It is a bad dude, guys. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but just from looking at it, like, it just has that, I mean, it fishes like a big spinnerbait, and I love it. I mean, I have just, you know, for targeting fish, especially in shallower water with lighter heads, I mean, right off the bat, you can see there I have 3/16 shaky ball heads on the bottom, an 1/8 in the middle, and then I've got my 2 little dummies on top, you know, set up the same way with my hitchhiker. But this thing is super light. I mean, I can just straight wing it, and I can fish it in 3, 4, 5 feet of water. I mean, that's how I've been catching a lot of my fish on the river lately, is in shallow water. But they're just targeting these schools of small bait, and the bait's not even shad that they're targeting. But, you know, this rig, because it is lighter, I mean, it's more user-friendly than any A-rig I've ever thrown in my life. And I mean, I would recommend, if you guys are new to this, you know, if you are intimidated by how these Alabama rigs fish, this is the one to get. And to the best of my knowledge, Tackle Shack still has a few, so scoop them up by all means. I mean, I've been very thoroughly impressed with this thing. It is the real deal. So I mentioned that those are the 2 rigs that I use now, and I'm gonna break down why right here. Where did I put that little sucker? Here we go. So you'll see this rig is set up with a 3, 1 in the middle, 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top. So that's kind of the standard like X cross setup. The reason why I only use rigs that are set up like this now is these dummies. So, not only just in Indiana, but also in all the BFLs that I fish in Michigan, the Mississippi River coming up, you can only use 3 hooks in those tournaments. So, setting up my hitchhiker there. You can only use 3 hooks in those tournaments. So I have to have a rig that sets up well for dummies. I mean, I can't just have a liability of a bait without a hook that the fish are going to eat often. And this really allows me to set it up where I can get those dummies small and, up out of the way like that, so that you've really got your attack baits, the ones you want them to eat are all down here below, hanging below the school where they're going to get eaten. And I would say, I don't mean to jinx myself right before the regional, but I have had very little bites where I was like, oh man, he hit my dummy. Setting it up this way is just the way to go, period. And the Flash Mob Junior is the exact same way. So that's why I lean hard on those 2 versus like the Strike King Titanium rig, which is a phenomenal rig if you can use 5 hooks, but it's got a plus sign design instead of an X. So at some point you have to run a dummy in a place that makes sense for a fish to eat, and that's just the risk I'm not willing to take. So that's explaining that. That's explaining why I use those rigs. I mean, mostly for fishability. You notice that they both have blades. That's a question that came up yesterday. They asked, I forget who it was, they asked, when do you use an A-rig with blades versus without blades? With blades would be always. Without blades would be never. I am not into catching fish that are smart enough to tell me that, oh, I want all the commotion of 5 swim baits, but the blades are a bit too much. So some A-rig snob out there right now is just like, oh, you're crazy, that's not how it works. But I'm telling you guys, buy the ones with blades. They fish better, you can feel them better. I mean, you want the absolute commotion of that rig to draw fish in. You're not worried about finessing them at that point. I mean, look at this rod. It's a broomstick, 20-pound line. I mean, I'm not playing games with those fish. I want them to get all caught up in what's happening and to attack, not to examine it for, 30 feet and then decide what they want to do. So, to kind of cover what I'm talking about, I said this rod's a broomstick. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do that. You don't have to use a super heavy rod. I'll explain the honest truth. This rig I would typically throw on a lighter rod. But right now I'm throwing it on a 7.6 heavy Denali Attacks. It's the same rod I use to flip a lot of times, and 20-pound line. The only reason I'm doing that is because I have the regional coming up in Mississippi. These baits are hard to come by right now, and if I snag this thing on the St. Joe River while I'm kind of practicing this whole river current thing, I can just straighten that out. So that shaky ball head is a phenomenal A-rig head. But the benefit of it is the hook is stout, but it's not so stout that you're going to break 20-pound tests. So you can, if you get hooked on a log or whatever, you will easily straighten out one of these hooks before you break your rig off, which sounds like a liability, but it's not. I mean, it is absolutely a good thing. You'll save yourself a lot of money in the long run by straightening out hooks and buying more bite me heads than you will buying new rigs. So that is, this rod is standard. So like if I was on Burton Mullet or St. Clair and I was throwing this rig with 3 1/4 ounce heads, I would want my big heavier rod. That's just my opinion. People will argue that. It's what I use. You don't have to do it. It's just easy for me because I can pretty well take my flipping rod from the summer, strip the 65-pound braid off of it, put a slower gear ratio reel, 20-pound test, and I'm ready to go. Now, if I were throwing that Shane's Baits rig in a tournament situation, this is the rod I really like, which is, I know you probably can't read it, but that is a 7'4" Denali Lithium, medium heavy. So this rod is good for heavy chatterbaits. It's good for 3/4 ounce traps, things like that. It's also really good for a super light A-rig, like running 3 1/8 ounce heads. It is better for hookups. You don't straighten out hooks as often. You can throw the bait farther. It's light. You can do whatever you want with it. I throw it 15, 17-pound line, so you don't have to have a dedicated A-rig setup if you go with one of those smaller rigs. So that kind of covers my rods. I said slow gear ratio. I usually go with a 6'4" or 6'8" 1. Lew's Super Duty is my favorite. This just happens to be a Lew's speed spool. So I've talked about the rigs that I use. I've talked about the rod, the reel, the line. Let's talk about swim baits. So, Keitech. I truly, You can throw any brand of swim bait on an A-rig, and to be honest, an A-rig is probably a better situation to throw generic swim baits than a single swimmer is, but I only throw Keitechs, and it is what it is. I just know that if I'm using a Keitech, that I'm using the best swim bait on the market, period. You know, I'm gonna get more bites than I would throwing anything else, in my opinion. So, but there's two different styles of Keitech for me, and I only use two. I know there's more than that, but I only use two styles. One is the Swing Impact Fat, which is what you see on this rig, which I said is the more beefed up version. The other is the Keitech Easy Shiner. All of this is available at Tackle Shack. You can find any of these in any of the colors that, you know, exist. Stock is pretty good right now. They've done a good job keeping the shelves full, so you know, it's ready for A-rig season. But so this rig, like I said, I'm throwing in shallower water right now, lighter heads. You know, I'm targeting fish that are eating small bait, and that's really the key. So those fish eating small bait, they don't want to see the big wide wobble of a 3.8 or a 4.3 swing impact. So this is the Easy Shiner on this one. It's a small little tail kick. It's a thin profile bait, and it really is good in that shallower water, because when I use these fats as a dummy, it kind of acts as a parachute effect. So these get up here and they're wobbling, and these cut through the water a lot better. So those Easy Shiners are down below really doing their thing, and you get a lot of bites doing that. Now, when I'm hunting really big fish, you know, 5-6 pound smallmouth on the Detroit River, Lake Erie, St. Clair, I almost exclusively throw 3.3s as my dummies, 3.8s as my, you know, focal point swim baits. The color you're seeing there, which you've seen a lot already now, is IU. It's the best color on the market for our area, in my opinion, day in and day out. It works where there's shad, it works where there's perch, it works where there's smelt. It is a deadly color. It's the best color Keitech makes, in my opinion, for us. My box is full of them. I'll show you that here in a second. But there's tons of colors that I go with, but IU, day in and day out, if I can only have one, is it, no question. So there, you know, we talked about swim baits a little bit. The Easy Shiner is the one I'm really kind of falling in love with for our area, just because so many times we think we're targeting shad eaters, but like, you know, on Klinger, fish are eating pin minnows. On the St. Joe River, they might be eating shad, but they're, you know, they're small shad for the most part. And even though that's a long bait, it just has that small profile. So that covers that. Trying to think what else we talked about. I just said, you know, it doesn't have to be a shad lake. You know, that was one of the questions. How do I know when to throw it? I'm going to throw it anytime fish are chasing bait. You know, for me, for the most part, that comes late in the year or early in the year. Water temps below, call it 65. But anytime that fish are out chasing bait relentlessly, an A-rig can work. And really, guys, it's simpler than you think. It is not a complicated technique. It is very simple to get yourself a rod that can sling it. Get yourself a couple rigs at Tackle Shack, get them set up kind of the way that I'm showing you. You always want to run your heavier heads down to the bottom so it keels out, your lighter head in the middle, and then run 2 weightless dummies up top. That's been the way I've done it forever. It lightens up the rig, it makes it easier to fish, and it's the way to do it. It's the legal way to do it, and it's just efficient and easy. So, you know, that's the rundown. It's not, you know, where you target fish with this thing is anywhere. That, you know, I could get into that, but it doesn't really help. I was catching fish the other day in 2 feet of water on this thing. I've caught fish in 40 feet of water with this thing. Anywhere your fish are chasing balls of bait in the fall, you can and you will catch them on an A-rig. I don't care if they're largemouth or smallmouth, or they're on Hamilton, or they're on Klinger, or they're on Duke's Bridge, or Lake Erie. It doesn't matter. This thing catches bass, and it really catches brown bass. So get yourself stocked up. Thanks for the cameo, Spencer.
Sorry.
I'm going to check my phone real quick because I had my questions pulled up from last night. So let's see. Cal asked when to use blades and when not. Like I said, blades all the time, never without, in my opinion. As far as Corey saying you didn't have confidence with it, I'm telling you, man, stop. You know, don't overcomplicate this thing. Get out there on lakes that you know where fish are, throw this thing around, slow roll it around, and you will get bites. It will happen, you know. And when you start getting bites, it's addicting. You can't put it down. Let's see. Man, that basically covers it, guys. You know, any other questions that you have more specifically, I'm gonna take the phone from Spencer for a second, just to, if you don't believe me about my Keitech addiction, I'm gonna show her what we're dealing with here. So, just so you guys know, All right, you see the bite me tackle over the lid here? I mean, you see some rage swimmers, yada yada, whatever, but I mean, there is a whole lot of Keitech in there. Not to mention, you've got some hiding in here. Oh yeah, she's saying you gotta hold it sideways. I apologize for that. Not to mention, you've got 3.3s in here. You got your easy shiners, small swing impacts. You know, it's thing is the deal, absolutely. I'll give it back to Spencer. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any more questions about A-rigging, any specific questions, anything that I can help you with, make sure to get in touch with me. We're ready to finish this season off. So I've got one more big tournament. That is the regional and lacrosse. That's next week. And then after that, you know, we're going to terrorize the local fish until next year comes around. So appreciate everybody's support. I hope this helps a little bit. And, you know, go catch some fish on an A-rig. Have some fun. I'll talk to you later.